The name Julius Caesar is synonymous with power, ambition, and a legacy that still shapes the world today. His very name is a symbol of greatness, a testament to a man who rose from the obscurity of a fading noble family to dominate the Roman world. But Caesar wasn't just a conqueror. He was a master of political maneuvering, a general whose military genius forever changed the art of war, and a leader whose ambition would lead him to challenge the very foundations of the Roman Republic. But who was he before the empire, the titles, and the betrayal? To truly understand Julius Caesar, we must first travel back to the roots of Rome itself, a city on the brink of collapse, yet ready to be reshaped by the hands of one man. Born in 100 BCE, in the heart of the Roman Republic, Julius Caesar entered a world at a crossroads. Rome was both a mighty superpower and a deeply divided republic. Wealth and power existed in extremes, with the rich patricians enjoying lavish lives while the plebeians, the common folk, suffered under the crushing weight of inequality. Caesar was born into the Julii family, who claimed noble blood, even tracing their lineage back to Venus, the Roman goddess of love. Yet, by the time Caesar was born, his family's glory had faded. They were once a powerful family, but by his childhood they lived in near obscurity. Their influence on Roman politics diminished. Caesar was no longer a part of an established aristocracy. Instead, he was the youngest member of a family with a noble title but little practical power. This world of opulence and squalor, of glory and ruin, would forge Caesar's character. Ambition burned deep in his soul, and as a young boy, he understood that in a city where personal fortunes could rise and fall on the whims of politics, ambition alone could change the fate of a man. For Caesar, ambition was not just a choice, it was a necessity. By the time he was 16, Caesar's life was already marked by hardship and ambition. His father, the head of the Julii family, died suddenly, leaving him to take on the mantle of responsibility. Young, headstrong, and politically astute, Caesar was thrust into a world of power struggles, where every move was a gamble, and alliances could make or break a person's future. Despite the family's dwindling wealth, Caesar made his first important political move. He married Cornelia, the daughter of Cinna, a prominent leader of the populares, the political faction that championed the rights of the common people. This marriage would prove to be a decisive moment in his early life. It brought him into direct opposition with Lucius Cornelius Sulla, the dictator of Rome. Sulla, a ruthless man who held an iron grip over Rome's politics, demanded that Caesar divorce Cornelia to secure his own position. Caesar, at the age of 18, refused. This single act of defiance would mark him as a man who would not bow to the powerful and established authorities of Rome, no matter the cost. Sulla, in response, ordered Caesar's disownment, and Caesar was left with no choice but to flee. Despite his exile, Caesar's resilience became clear. Living as a fugitive, hunted by Sulla's agents, he gained valuable experience that would shape his future political and military career. At the time, no one could have foreseen that the young man risking death for his beliefs would one day hold the fate of Rome itself in his hands. In the face of death, Caesar never wavered. His defiance earned him the respect of many in Rome's political underworld, setting the stage for his rise. As Caesar made his return to Rome, the political climate was ripe for change. The Republic was in chaos. The Senate, once the heart of Roman democracy, was a battleground for power, and the political factions were as fractured as the city itself. Caesar, with his charm, intelligence, and ruthless determination, quickly began to climb the ladder of political power. In Rome, it wasn't enough to simply be a good speaker or a skilled politician. To survive and to thrive, one needed alliances. Caesar knew that better than anyone. His reputation as an eloquent speaker, paired with his connections to the populares, allowed him to gain the trust of the people. But it was his ability to connect with both the masses and the political elite that made him stand out. His military service in Asia Minor, where he fought under Marcus Minucius Thermus, also played a crucial role in shaping his future. Caesar proved himself to be more than just a politician. He was a military genius, capable of leading men into battle and winning. His performance on the battlefield earned him the prestigious civic crown, a military honor reserved for those who saved the lives of Roman citizens. After gaining recognition through military service, Caesar returned to Rome and set his sights on higher offices. He became a military tribune, a position that granted him more political leverage. Yet, despite his growing influence, Caesar knew that his true path to power lay not in titles alone, but in how he played the complex game of Roman politics. By now, the world of extreme wealth and absolute poverty, of ruthless ambition and political betrayal had become Caesar's playground. His ability to adapt and manipulate the system made him a force to be reckoned with, but it also painted a target on his back. By his early 30s, Caesar had already proven that he was not a man content to wait his turn. He understood that Roman politics was a game where only the most ambitious survived, and for Caesar, mere survival was never enough. To truly shape his destiny, he needed to create powerful alliances that would allow him to control the levers of power in Rome. In 60 BCE, Caesar made one of the most important political moves in Roman history. He formed the First Triumvirate, a secret, informal alliance with two of Rome's most influential and powerful men, Pompey the Great, the celebrated military hero, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome. This wasn't just a casual partnership, it was a masterstroke of political maneuvering. Caesar understood that in Rome, power was about influence and control. And what better way to consolidate that power than by bringing together the leading military force, Pompey, the financial muscle, Crassus, and the political ambition, Caesar himself. Together, they would dominate the Roman political landscape. The First Triumvirate wasn't officially recognized by the Senate, but that didn't matter. With this alliance, Caesar secured Pompey's military support in exchange for land for his veterans, and Crassus's wealth and influence to counterbalance the growing political establishment in the Senate. But it was also a strategic move to protect Caesar's own ambition. Pompey, with his military triumphs in the East, was seeking recognition and land for his soldiers. Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome, wanted political support to protect his business interests and maintain his power. Caesar, on the other hand, had one goal in mind: military command. He needed resources, soldiers, and the political backing of these two powerful men to propel him to the top. While the First Triumvirate looked like a simple alliance of convenience, it was, in fact, a brilliantly crafted political strategy. Caesar, ever the tactician, understood the balance of power and how to manipulate it. He used his charisma and political acumen to forge bonds between two men who, on their own, were powerful but divided by their own egos and ambitions. What's fascinating is that Pompey, known for his strength on the battlefield and his influence in the Senate, was not an easy person to get along with. In fact, his relationship with Caesar was often tense and marked by competition for power. While they shared a mutual interest in keeping Rome's political landscape in their favor, Pompey's pride made him a difficult ally. However, Caesar used his diplomatic skills to smooth over their differences, allowing him to build a strategic alliance with the powerful general. Similarly, the relationship between Caesar and Crassus was one of necessity, but not one born from personal trust or camaraderie. Crassus was often seen as the more calculating and reserved member of the trio. He had his own ambitions, and while he was willing to support Caesar's rise, he also saw the potential for exploiting Caesar's growing influence for his own benefit. Caesar's ability to balance these complex relationships without appearing as though he was being used speaks volumes about his political savvy. The First Triumvirate was more than just a political alliance. It was a machine that began to shape the future of Rome. Together, the three men used their combined resources to control Rome's Senate, passing laws and securing land for Pompey's soldiers and a stream of lucrative political posts for Caesar. As the months went by, Caesar began to consolidate power in ways that would ultimately make him irreplaceable. For example, one of Caesar's first acts after forming the triumvirate was to secure for himself a position that would provide him with military command, which led to his appointment to govern Gaul. This was a crucial moment. Gaul, at the time, was a vast and uncivilized region filled with warring tribes, but it was rich in resources and had great strategic value. To Caesar, this wasn't just an opportunity to conquer and add territory to Rome. It was a chance to prove his military prowess and earn immense personal fame. Meanwhile, Pompey used the alliance to secure land for his veterans and to have his previous military successes officially recognized by the Senate. Crassus, though less involved in military matters at the time, helped ensure that his wealth was protected and that his business interests were safeguarded through his political influence. Though the triumvirate seemed strong in theory, tensions between Pompey and Caesar began to surface. The root of their growing conflict lay in personal ambition. Pompey, after the successful campaigns in the East, expected his demands to be met by the Senate. He wanted to ensure that his soldiers were compensated for their service with land, and he wanted Rome to acknowledge the full extent of his military achievements. But Caesar, who by now had tasted the sweetness of victory and the loyalty of his army, had a different vision. His eyes were firmly set on the future, and he was intent on leveraging his growing military successes to amass even more power. As the years passed, Caesar's ambitions only grew, and his relationship with Pompey became more strained. In 52 BCE, tensions between Caesar and Pompey came to a head when the Senate, now largely influenced by Pompey, began to strip Caesar of his military command. This move was seen as a direct challenge to Caesar's power and a clear sign that Pompey, once his ally, now stood in opposition to his rise. In 58 BCE, Caesar set his sights on the wild and untamed lands of Gaul, a vast region to the north of Rome, filled with hostile tribes and rich in resources. At this point, Caesar was no longer just an ambitious politician. His military career was about to define him in ways that would forever change the course of Roman history. Caesar's military command in Gaul wasn't just an assignment. It was his opportunity to shine. He was tasked with suppressing the tribes that had been causing problems along the Roman frontier. The Senate thought this would be a straightforward campaign, assuming that it would be another military conquest to add to the empire's list of triumphs. What they didn't realize was that Caesar's genius would turn Gaul into his personal theater of victory, and it would propel him to the height of power. The first significant battle in Caesar's campaign came against the Helvetii, a Celtic tribe from modern-day Switzerland. The Helvetii had decided to migrate westward, and they were crossing into Roman territory. Caesar, with a brilliant strategic move, intercepted them and defeated them decisively, forcing the Helvetii to return home. But this was just the beginning. Caesar's swift victory against the Helvetii helped establish his reputation as a leader capable of making quick, decisive moves in the field. This victory also allowed Caesar to establish credibility with his soldiers, men who would follow him through countless battles in the years to come. As the campaign unfolded, Caesar was confronted by the rising threat of the Germanic tribes. In 55 BCE, he faced a challenge unlike any before. A massive army of Germans led by the chieftain Ariovistus crossed the Rhine and threatened Roman territory. With incredible speed and tactical brilliance, Caesar not only defeated them, but also built a bridge over the Rhine River, a remarkable feat of engineering at the time to prove Rome's dominance over the tribes. This audacious move struck fear into the hearts of Rome's enemies and bolstered Caesar's standing as a military innovator. As the Gallic campaign progressed, Caesar faced a series of increasingly difficult battles, each more complex and demanding than the last. However, it was during these battles that Caesar's leadership and strategic mind came to the forefront. The Battle of Bibracte in 58 BCE was one of his first major successes. The Germanic and Celtic tribes had joined forces to challenge the Roman legions, but Caesar's brilliant use of the terrain, along with his soldiers' discipline, led to a decisive victory. This victory was crucial in establishing Caesar's reputation as a military genius, capable of turning the tide even against overwhelming odds. But it wasn't just the tactics that defined Caesar's success. It was his ability to inspire unwavering loyalty among his soldiers. His men were not just soldiers. They were brothers in arms. Caesar, in turn, treated them with respect and ensured they were well fed and equipped for battle. His soldiers admired his ability to lead from the front, often placing himself in the thick of the fighting. In a world where generals typically stayed far behind the lines, Caesar's courage and willingness to fight alongside his troops made him an unparalleled leader. This personal connection between Caesar and his soldiers would become a cornerstone of his power, making them fiercely loyal to him, something that would later be instrumental when the time came to march on Rome. However, no battle encapsulated Caesar's genius more than the siege of Alesia in 52 BCE, a turning point in the Gallic Wars. The Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix, an astute and charismatic leader, united the disparate Gallic tribes in a final stand against the Roman invaders. He took refuge in the heavily fortified hilltop town of Alesia, surrounded by Caesar's legions and defended by Gallic reinforcements. What followed was a master class in siege warfare. Caesar's legions, vastly outnumbered, built a series of fortifications around Alesia, trapping the defenders inside while simultaneously repelling the massive Gallic relief army attempting to break the siege. The siege of Alesia showcased Caesar's unparalleled skill in strategy and logistics, as he was able to maintain his army's morale and outmaneuver two hostile forces at once. This victory was not just a triumph of arms. It was a defining moment in Caesar's military career. It cemented his reputation as a general capable of extraordinary feats of strategy and battlefield leadership. Alesia would become one of the key events that marked Caesar as the most formidable military leader of his era. As the years went by, Caesar's victories in Gaul began to turn him into a national hero. The people of Rome saw him as a man who could deliver glory and riches through conquest. But for Caesar, it was never just about the spoils of war. It was about consolidating his position. His campaigns were heavily documented in Commentaria de Bello Gallico, a series of commentaries in which Caesar chronicled his own campaigns. Though meant to serve as a public relations tool to bolster his image in Rome, the commentaries also provided a window into Caesar's genius, both as a writer and as a leader. Despite his growing popularity, his conquest was also creating friction with the Roman Senate, who were beginning to feel threatened by Caesar's rising power. They worried that his success in Gaul might inspire him to march on Rome itself, a fear that would soon become a reality. What truly set Caesar apart from other generals was his ability to inspire absolute loyalty and affection among his men. He didn't just command his soldiers, he led them. His relationship with his army was one of mutual respect and devotion. Caesar was not just a general to his soldiers, he was a protector and a leader whom they trusted unconditionally. He frequently shared their hardships, from the cold of winter camps to the perilous front lines of battle. Caesar's relationship with the people of Rome was similarly built on loyalty and trust. As his fame grew, so did his popularity among the plebeians, the common folk of Rome. He understood the power of public opinion and was adept at using his victories and political acumen to portray himself as the champion of the people. He built a reputation as someone who could deliver victory and prosperity to the city, not just through military success, but also by ensuring that his soldiers and the common people shared in the spoils of war. It was the year 49 BCE, and Caesar stood at a crossroads. His reputation as a military genius was solidified, his power in Gaul unmatched. But back in Rome, the political landscape had become increasingly hostile. His alliance with Pompey and Crassus, the legendary First Triumvirate, had already begun to crumble. Pompey, once an ally, had turned into a rival. The Senate, now under the influence of Pompey, saw Caesar's power as a threat. The stakes were high and the tension was palpable. Caesar, more than any other Roman leader, had always understood that politics and power were intricately linked. To secure his future, he had to act. It all came down to a single decision: cross the Rubicon. The Rubicon River marked the boundary between Caesar's military command in Gaul and the heart of the Roman Republic. By Roman law, no general was allowed to bring his army into Italy without disbanding it first. Crossing the Rubicon was a direct challenge to the authority of Rome and an act of treason. It was a moment that would decide the fate of the Republic. Why did Caesar take this monumental risk? Politically, his options had narrowed. He was no longer the hero of Gaul or the politician playing the Senate's game. After his term as consul, Caesar's political enemies had worked to strip him of his military command and prevent him from running for the consulship again. Pompey, once his close ally, had sided with the Senate, seeking to curb Caesar's growing power. As Caesar's rival in Rome, Pompey's increasing influence made a clash inevitable. Personal ambition played a part too. Caesar's sense of destiny, the belief that he was born for greatness, was at odds with the Senate's growing disdain. He had conquered Gaul, amassed wealth, and built a loyal army, but his enemies were trying to strip him of everything he had earned. There was no turning back. The Rubicon was more than just a river. It was a metaphor for his commitment to fight for absolute power. When Caesar finally made the decision to cross the Rubicon, he is famously said to have declared, "The die is cast." This phrase encapsulated the gravity of the moment. The decision was irreversible. Crossing the Rubicon meant more than just starting a civil war. It meant ending the Republic as it had existed for centuries. Caesar's march on Rome would not only define his future, but the future of Rome itself. As Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he made his intentions clear. Rome would not remain in the hands of the Senate or Pompey. It was now a battle for the future of the Republic, and the stakes were higher than ever. The Senate, led by Pompey and other prominent senators, called for military action against Caesar's army. But Caesar's forces were already on the march. His decision to bring his legions into Italy sent shockwaves through Rome. Pompey, caught off guard, was forced to flee the city, taking his forces to the south, and then eventually to Greece. This marked the beginning of the Roman Civil War, a war that would pit Caesar's forces against those loyal to Pompey and the Senate. Caesar was known not just for his bravery, but for his exceptional strategic mind. The Civil War would see his tactical genius put to the ultimate test. One of the first major confrontations was the Battle of Ilerda in 49 BCE, fought in modern-day Spain. Caesar faced a relatively small but determined force loyal to Pompey. Despite being outnumbered, Caesar's use of maneuvering, deception, and superior tactics overwhelmed Pompey's forces. It was a crucial victory that sent a clear message. Caesar was no ordinary general. He was a master of warfare. Following Ilerda, Caesar's army marched on to Brundisium, a port town in the south of Italy. Here, Caesar's forces faced another critical test: the arrival of Pompey's reinforcements. Caesar was forced to outwit his opponent yet again. By using a series of surprise maneuvers, he was able to block Pompey's forces from landing and secure his position in Italy. Despite Pompey's initial successes in Greece, where he gained the support of several military commanders, the war turned in Caesar's favor. In 48 BCE, the two sides met in the pivotal Battle of Pharsalus, one of the most decisive battles in Roman history. At Pharsalus, Caesar's army, though outnumbered, decisively defeated Pompey's forces. Pompey's soldiers, demoralized and poorly led, were routed by Caesar's disciplined legions. It was a stunning victory, showcasing Caesar's ability to strike decisively and his genius for turning the tide of battle. Pompey, having fled the battlefield, eventually sought refuge in Egypt, a fateful decision that would ultimately lead to his death. After reaching Alexandria, Pompey was betrayed and assassinated by the orders of the young Egyptian king, Ptolemy III. With Pompey gone, Caesar emerged as the undisputed leader of Rome. But the civil war was far from over. Caesar's victory in the east was followed by campaigns to suppress other forces loyal to the Senate, including those in Africa and Spain. His victory over Cato the Younger in Utica, 46 BCE, and Metellus Scipio in Munda, 45 BCE, effectively ended organized opposition to his rule. By the time the dust settled, Caesar was the last man standing. His victory in the Civil War left him with complete control of Rome. The Senate, now fully under his control, declared him dictator perpetuo, dictator for life, effectively ending the republic that had ruled Rome for centuries. Caesar's political rivals were either dead or in exile, and his influence over Rome was absolute. Caesar's victory wasn't just military, it was political, and it represented the final blow to the old system of governance in Rome. The Senate, once the heart of Roman politics, had been reduced to a mere figurehead, powerless in the face of Caesar's dominance. Pompey, who had once been his ally and co-ruler of the Roman world, had been outmaneuvered, betrayed, and killed. His dreams of leading Rome were shattered by Caesar's brilliant military and political moves. The Civil War had not only torn Rome apart, it had set the stage for the rise of an emperor. Caesar's victory, though hard-fought, would mark the beginning of the end for the Republic and the dawn of the Roman Empire. The moment Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he did more than start a civil war. He cast his lot in favor of absolute power. His decision to defy the Senate and Pompey, a move that could have led to his destruction, turned him into a national hero. Through his military victories, his understanding of politics, and his willingness to take risks, Caesar transformed Rome and changed the world forever. The phrase, "the die is cast," serves as a testament to his boldness and his deep belief in his own destiny. As the Civil War concluded and Caesar stood victorious, the consequences of his actions rippled through history. His rise marked the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of a new era, one where Rome would be ruled by emperors, and the power of the Senate would be forever diminished. After being appointed dictator for life, Julius Caesar's power over Rome became almost absolute. This was a critical turning point in Roman history, as the Republic, which had functioned for centuries under the ideal of shared power, was now under the command of a single man. Caesar had already demonstrated his military genius, his ability to control the masses, and his unyielding drive to reshape Rome. But now, he was tasked with holding together the fragile political system he had inherited. In many ways, Caesar's tenure as dictator was marked by a series of far-reaching reforms. But at the heart of his rule was a fundamental shift in how Rome was governed. Gone were the days when power was shared among the Senate, the consuls, and the people. Caesar's reign represented an erosion of republican values, one that was both practical and controversial. For the most part, Caesar's relationship with the Senate was complex, marked by both cooperation and significant tension. After all, the Senate was still filled with powerful men, many of whom had been Caesar's rivals. And though Caesar's leadership was widely accepted, his absolute power did not sit well with everyone. At first, Caesar made efforts to maintain a semblance of republican tradition, even as he centralized power. He continued to consult the Senate on key decisions and publicly portrayed himself as a protector of Roman ideals. He even allowed the Senate to ratify some of his reforms, which helped to keep the illusion of cooperation alive. But behind closed doors, Caesar's grip on power became increasingly tight. He surrounded himself with loyalists and reduced the Senate's ability to make independent decisions. The Senate had once been the check on the power of Rome's rulers. But under Caesar, it had been reduced to a rubber-stamp body whose influence was waning. Caesar's approach to the Senate was strategic. He wanted to avoid outright conflict, yet he had no intention of sharing power. He also weakened the Senate in subtle ways, including limiting their financial powers and controlling elections. The Senate was no longer a place where power could be contested. It was now a place where Caesar's will could be implemented. Despite these tensions, many senators had to recognize Caesar's genius. His reforms, while controversial, were good for Rome's economy and security. Caesar's popularity with the common people, particularly the plebs, was undeniable. This made any opposition to him risky, as it could lead to a public backlash. With his power solidified, Caesar pushed forward with reforms aimed at both securing Rome's future and cementing his legacy. These reforms were wide-ranging, addressing the economic, social, and political structures of Rome. Though they often benefited the people, they did not come without their own set of challenges. One of Caesar's most immediate priorities was to reward his loyal veterans. Soldiers who had fought for him throughout the Civil War and the campaigns in Gaul. These men were the backbone of his power, and Caesar needed to ensure their loyalty for the future. His solution was to redistribute land to his veterans, especially to those who had served in the army during his campaigns. This land redistribution, though popular with his soldiers, was deeply resented by the Senate and the Roman elite. Many wealthy landowners saw this as a threat to their influence, as Caesar was redistributing land from the public domain and awarding it to his veterans, many of whom were common men without significant political power. Caesar also built new colonies in various parts of the Roman world, further diluting the power of the old Roman aristocracy by creating new centers of loyalty outside Rome. Caesar didn't just focus on the political elite. He also took steps to improve life for the common people. One of his most enduring achievements was the reform of the Roman calendar. The Julian calendar, introduced in 45 BCE, was a solar calendar, correcting the errors of the lunar calendar that had long been in use. But Caesar's social reforms didn't stop there. He expanded the grain dole for the people of Rome, ensuring that the poorest citizens had access to food during times of hardship. This move was highly popular among the plebs, but it further angered the elite, who viewed it as an unnecessary expansion of government power. To further cement his rule, Caesar launched monumental public works projects that showcased his ability to control both the physical landscape and the political future of Rome. He built grand temples, expanded the Senate House, and created new roads and bridges throughout the empire. These projects were symbols of Roman greatness, and while they improved the infrastructure of Rome, they also served as constant reminders of Caesar's power. The Senate, despite its symbolic role, began to lose credibility. The men who had once controlled Rome's vast wealth and political machinery now found themselves sidelined, their influence diminishing with each passing year. Caesar's insistence on centralizing power in his hands alienated those who had once held sway in the Senate, creating deep resentment and fear. As Caesar's mandate for life continued, the tension between him and the Senate grew palpable. The Roman elite, including several former allies, began to question whether Caesar had any intention of sharing power in the future. It was clear that he had no plans to relinquish his position anytime soon. Caesar's monarchical style of leadership was unsettling for many in the Senate, who had long resisted any concentration of power. In fact, there were rumors that Caesar was preparing to dissolve the Senate altogether and replace it with a body of his own making, thus completely transforming Rome into a personal monarchy. The Senate, while still appearing to cooperate with Caesar, was deeply divided. Some senators, particularly those with strong personal ambitions, began plotting behind Caesar's back. Despite this, the emperor's hold over Rome seemed unshakable for now. Caesar's reign as dictator for life remains one of the most pivotal periods in Roman history. While many of his reforms were designed to benefit Rome's common people, his increasing concentration of power raised the stakes for those in the Senate, who feared that Caesar was dismantling the very foundations of the Republic. His reign was not merely about political dominance. It was about transforming the Roman state from a republic to a personal empire, with Caesar at the helm. The reforms he implemented during this time, though contentious, laid the groundwork for the future Roman Empire. It was during this time that Rome's transition from republic to empire became a tangible reality, setting the stage for the emperors who would follow. By the time Caesar had achieved the height of his power, his reign as dictator for life had become increasingly controversial. His centralization of power, his monumental reforms, and his monarchical style of leadership alienated many within the Senate, particularly those who still clung to the ideals of the Republic. The Senate's fear of Caesar's absolute rule reached a breaking point, and whispers of a conspiracy began to circulate. The conspirators, a group of more than 60 senators, believed that assassinating Caesar was the only way to preserve the Republic and restore the balance of power between the Senate and the people. They saw Caesar as a tyrant, someone who was seeking to replace the Republic with a monarchy, and they feared that if he lived, he would eventually crown himself king, a fate that was unthinkable for those who upheld Roman tradition. At the heart of the conspiracy were prominent figures, including Brutus, the son of one of Caesar's former allies, and Cassius, a senator with personal and political grudges against Caesar. Both Brutus and Cassius had close ties to Caesar, but they were deeply troubled by his growing dominance over the Roman state. For them, the assassination was an act of patriotism, a way to restore the Republic by removing the man who had amassed too much power. There were differing motivations among the conspirators. Some were driven by a genuine belief in the Republic's ideals, while others were motivated by personal resentment or the desire to claim power for themselves. Regardless of their reasons, the conspirators saw Caesar's death as the only way to avert the collapse of the Senate's authority. Despite the growing tension, Caesar had no reason to suspect that his own colleagues, men he had once trusted, were plotting his death. He had been warned about the danger to his life, including through the famous dreams of his wife, Calpurnia, and the soothsayer who had advised him to beware the Ides of March. However, Caesar's confidence in his own invincibility and the immense popularity he enjoyed with the people of Rome led him to dismiss these warnings. On the Ides of March, 44 BCE, the fateful day arrived. Caesar entered the Senate house, unaware that his closest allies had turned against him. The conspirators had planned his assassination with meticulous care, and they were waiting for the right moment to strike. As Caesar sat on his throne-like chair in the Senate house, the conspirators closed in, including Brutus and Cassius. The plot unfolded with terrifying speed. The first blow was struck by Servilius Casca, who lunged at Caesar, wounding him. Caesar tried to defend himself, but he was quickly surrounded by more than 60 senators, each one taking turns to strike him with their daggers. The most poignant moment came when Brutus, whom Caesar had considered almost like a son, stepped forward. According to legend, Caesar, in his final moments, uttered the famous words, "Et tu, Brute?" And you, Brutus? Expressing his shock and betrayal at the sight of his beloved friend and confidant joining the assassination. Caesar's death was swift, but its ramifications would be far-reaching. The assassins believed that they were acting in the name of freedom and the Republic, but they had miscalculated. Rather than restoring power to the Senate, Caesar's assassination plunged Rome into chaos, leading to a new phase of civil war and the eventual rise of Augustus, formerly Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. The immediate aftermath of Caesar's assassination was one of disorder and confusion. In the days following his death, Rome was plunged into a state of mourning, and the streets were filled with angry citizens who had supported Caesar. They saw him as the savior of Rome, the man who had promised a better future for them, and his sudden death by the hands of those they trusted caused an eruption of public outrage. The Senate, which had thought Caesar's death would restore the old republican system, was left divided. Many senators had underestimated Caesar's influence and the loyalty of his followers. The assassination did not restore their power. It created a power vacuum that was quickly filled by Caesar's loyalists, including his grandnephew Octavian, later known as Augustus, and his general, Mark Antony. Meanwhile, the conspirators quickly realized that their actions had triggered a political storm they were ill-prepared to control. The Republic was dying, and there was no going back. The vision of a return to the old Roman Republic was no longer possible. Caesar's death marked the end of the Roman Republic. While his reforms had shaken the foundations of the Republic, his assassination by those who believed they were saving it only accelerated its decline. The power struggles that ensued following his death paved the way for the establishment of the Roman Empire under Caesar Augustus, marking the true birth of imperial Rome. Though Caesar had been killed, his legacy lived on, and his death became a catalyst for the transformation of Rome from a republic into an empire, fundamentally altering the course of Western history. His vision, reforms, and leadership had already redefined Rome, and though his life had ended, his influence would continue to shape the future of Rome for centuries to come. Caesar's assassination was one of the most significant events in world history, not because it ended his life, but because it marked the beginning of the end for the Roman Republic. His death set the stage for a new era of power struggles, civil wars, and eventual imperial rule under Augustus. Though the conspirators thought they had struck a blow for liberty and the preservation of the Roman way, they failed to see that Caesar's legacy was too powerful to be extinguished. His death created a vacuum that would eventually lead to the rise of one man, the first emperor of Rome, who would reshape the world in Caesar's image. The Ides of March will forever stand as a symbol of betrayal, political ambition, and the fragility of power. It's a reminder that in the pursuit of idealistic goals, even the most seemingly noble intentions can lead to unexpected consequences. Although Julius Caesar's life was abruptly cut short, his political vision and military genius set in motion the forces that would lead to the transformation of the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire. His assassination may have temporarily delayed this change, but it was already inevitable. Caesar's death sparked a civil war among his successors, Mark Antony, Octavian, Augustus, and others, but ultimately it was Octavian who emerged victorious. In 27 BCE, Octavian declared himself the first Roman emperor, taking the title Augustus, and thus the Roman Empire was born, ending the long-standing republic that Caesar had so greatly altered. In a very real sense, Caesar's legacy lived on in Augustus's reign. The transformation from a republic to an empire may have been the result of military conquest and political maneuvering, but it was Caesar's influence and reforms that had created the framework for it all. His centralization of power, his use of the military for political gains, and his personal authority became the model for the emperors who followed him. Even his military campaigns, particularly the conquest of Gaul, established a precedent for how Roman emperors would engage in wars of conquest to expand the empire. Caesar's strategy, organization, and command of his legions were the cornerstones of Roman military success, and his ability to inspire loyalty among his soldiers became the standard for future military leaders. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the life of one of history's most fascinating figures, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more gripping documentaries, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our next historical exploration. And don't forget to check out our next video, where we'll be exploring the rise and fall of other legendary leaders who changed the course of history forever. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter of history.